Okuma's leader, Mary Combs, is fired. Wait till you hear what's been discovered about her and FEMA, what she's been up to. Australian nurses are suspended after threatening to kill Israeli patients. Imagine that. If you're Jewish, you go to the hospital in Australia. If you have a person that's Muslim, you might be dead. But check this out. Opening story at Today in Prophecy, daily news in 15 minutes or less, news with a biblical perspective. This opening story, Zelensky, what does he have to say? Ukraine is prepared to offer territory and swap with Russia, says Zelensky, but that's not all. Also, Trump makes a phone call to Putin and essentially ends the war. I mean, we're watching things with what Biden did over the last 4 years. Pretty unbelievable when you look at Ukraine and Russia. Most of us were thinking, well, many of us, I shouldn't say most of us, say many of us were saying, hey, this whole Ukraine stuff is money laundering. We know the stuff with Hunter Biden. There's so many different things there, what Joe Biden himself was doing. If you go back to the beginning of Biden's presidency, what were we warning about before then when Trump was president? And I said it repeatedly, we would not have this war with Russia and Ukraine. We wouldn't have had the Hamas October 7, 2023 invasion of Israel. We wouldn't have Iran firing ballistic missiles at Israel. So many different dynamics would not have been taking place. Well, here he is, Trump's now president. What do we see? Russia and Ukraine starting to work things out. Ukraine saying we are prepared to offer territory, a swap with Russia. Very fascinating. And again, Zelensky, listen, the guy's an evil man, but still, it was just a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, he said, hey, there's $100 billion that's missing. And we also know now that a whole bunch of that was going to the cartel down in Mexico, and more is being discovered. Well, moving on from there, this is reported of the Jewish News Syndicate. Australia medical staff suspended for anti-Israel hate speech. Listen, there's more to it than just this. As I'm watching things come out, Israeli dogs carney to this hospital and I send them to hell. One professional was recorded saying in a video chat, 2 medical professionals in Australia were suspended from their work at a hospital after they were filmed speaking about not treating and killing Israelis at work, local media reported on Wednesday. There's more to this, and more is going to be coming out. Well, I hope more is exposed about this. But I'm watching these things going, okay, if you're Jewish and you go to a hospital in Australia, and I'm thinking whether or not you're an Israeli citizen or an Australian citizen that's Jewish. You go to a hospital in Australia and this is the thing happening, but this isn't just a warning to Australia when you have Muslim staff or anti-Semitic staff. What about going to a hospital anywhere? This is just going to escalate the fear that Jews have. And another reason for Jews to do their Aliyah, just thinking of a conversation I had with Avi Lipkin, and many of you have probably seen it, but he said, hey, he is expecting a Holocaust of sorts to come to America that's going to drive more Jews back home to Israel. But if you look at this, you go, okay, is this happening in American hospitals? What about hospitals in other places in the world where you have anti-Semitism is prevalent and Islam is prevalent? Be very concerned if I, as a Jewish person, going to one of these places. You know, listen, I also want to ask you to pray for my friend, Dr. Hillel Newman. He was at one time the Israeli consul in Los Angeles, and that's how I got to meet him. And he's not a believer in Jesus, very friendly with evangelicals because he knows that there's some evangelicals that understand God's covenant that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But now, my friend Hillel Newman, he is now the Israeli consul in Australia. I believe in Melbourne is where he's located. But pray for him. Wonderful man. Pray that he comes to know Jesus also and for their protection. Moving on from there, J.D. Vance says this, expect this breakneck pace for the next 4 years. You're looking at something like this and going, man, how fast everything keeps unfolding. More and more is being exposed. as Trump is just constantly doing something. And now we're watching what's going on in Gaza. Folks, we'll keep you updated. But looking at this, Trump says all hell is going to break loose. I know we talked about this yesterday. You've seen it. Trump says all hell is going to break loose come Saturday at noon if all of the hostages are not released. And Hamas says, oh yeah, that ain't going to happen. And then we watch different dynamics that are going on also with Egypt and so forth. So we're watching all of these different things unfold at the same time. And Netanyahu been given the green light by Trump to just go after Hamas. And in Gaza, what is going to happen come Saturday? I am guessing Trump is not bluffing. Here's the other thing to keep in mind. When we saw these Israeli hostages that were just released the other day, and now Hamas says we're not going to release anymore, when you can see the further they're getting down the line of releasing hostages, the worse and worse physical shape they're in, you really got to wonder if Hamas is doing this because they know the rest of the hostages are perhaps dead. But Israel isn't just going to leave them there. Dead or alive, they will recover their people. But you'll look at this, in my personal opinion, it is not going to go well for Hamas. And just terrible things are happening. But as we're watching at the same time, anti-Semitism is increasing. And we know biblically the persecution against genuine believers is going to increase in the last days. And so is the anti-Semitism. It's going to increase. Just another sign that Jesus is coming, and this is where we get our hope. We see the things that are going on in this world, and man, the unbelievable days we live in. We live in amazing days, but I think of what was said through the Old Testament minor prophet by the Lord, show them the amazing thing that is coming. What was the amazing thing that was coming? Babylon was coming to judge. We live in amazing days to see prophecies coming together, but it's a warning that the Lord is about ready to judge. Rapture's going to happen, and the tribulation's going to come. So keep your head looking up. Jesus himself said, when you see these things begin to take place, look up and lift up your head because your redemption draws near. Moving on from there, just more things are being uncovered and exposed. The director of FEMA, Mary Combs, has been fired. Check this one out. She's been fired. 4 FEMA officials fired after Musk's Doge claims agency funded migrant housing in luxury hotels. In fact, she's in all kinds of trouble. But check this out. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Get this. The firings follow a Monday post from Musk who alleged FEMA spent, get this, are you guys sitting down? Get this, $59 million just last week alone, housing migrants in luxury and 5-star hotels. Wow, in New York City, $59 million last week alone. I'm telling you, this is just the tip of the iceberg. What is really going on? I guarantee you, these politicians and these leaders of these organizations, these government agencies, listen, follow the money trail. I guarantee you there are payoffs. And who got all the points for these luxury hotels? That's a good question. $59 million to house illegal aliens. By the way, coming across the border illegally makes you a criminal. So illegal alien criminals, $59 million last week alone. Let that sink in. I'm glad these things are being exposed. I'm glad these things are being dealt with. Where's it going to go? We'll know in the future, but right now, these things are just evil. Moving on, town hall reports. Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, has some harsh words for Pope Francis. To recap, he didn't hold back when he spoke criticism of Pope Francis, but to recap, the article says, Pope Francis addressed bishops in the United States on Tuesday. In a letter, he spoke on Trump's ongoing mass deportation efforts. This was the policy Trump promised to carry out beginning on the first day of his presidency. The president has kept his word, sending illegal aliens out of the states in droves. In the Pope's letter, he asserted that he supports the nation's right to defend itself from criminals. However, his support stops there. The act of deporting people who in many cases have left their own land for reasons of extreme poverty, insecurity, exploitation, persecution, or serious deterioration of the environment damages the dignity of many men and women and of entire families. Wow. He calls on all the Christian faithful who are called upon to consider the legitimacy of norms and public policies in the light of the dignity of the person and his or her fundamental rights, not vice versa, claims the Pope. Well, I've got harsh words for the Pope, says Homan. The Pope ought to fix his eyes on the Catholic Church. I'm saying this as a lifelong Catholic. I was baptized Catholic. My first communion was as a Catholic, confirmation as a Catholic. He ought to fix his eyes on the Catholic Church and concentrate on his work and leave the border enforcement up to us. He has a lot more to say on that. But as I look at this also, the Catholic dogma itself, it says, hey, you cannot have people living, it basically says living illegally inside of a country. They need to do everything rightly. And when you look at, very interesting, as you see these things unfolding coming out of the Catholic Church, because the Vatican itself has a massive border around it. It's its own country. You can't go inside their border without being ID'd. Gee, what a concept. Without being checked for weapons, without being given a specific time that you're allotted to be in there, and you better leave before the sun goes down because they ain't going to let you pitch a tent. They ain't going to put you up in any kind of hotel. They aren't going to feed you. They aren't going to give you water. You're going to have to pay for every single thing you want, and they are going to kick your buns right outside on the other side of that wall as soon as your time is up. The hypocrisy of the Pope is just absolutely off the charts, but I suppose that should be no surprise to us. But it's just evil, and borders are biblical. Remember Nehemiah? Yeah, borders are biblical. It wasn't just Nehemiah. Remember, God gave the borders to the 12 tribes of Israel. Boy, do those upset people these days. Unbelievable. In fact, God gave Israel the area of Gaza. Interesting, isn't it? God will deal with that. Moving on, last article, All Israel News. Check this out. Let's end on some good news. Iranian ex-commander, now believer in Jesus, addresses members of the Knesset. I am here and I am standing with Israel. Why is that? Listen, I am meeting so many people from Iran, even here in the United States, that are coming to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. It is an amazing thing to see. And what they are understanding is God made a covenant with the people of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because they have come to faith in Jesus Christ. And we are seeing Iranian after Iranian supporting the nation of Israel. While people here in the West are totally against Israel, we have anti-Semitism growing from people who claim to be Christians. That's because they only read the part of the Bible that they like. They don't want to read the rest of it. God bless you, and thank you for joining me today. And we'll see you back here tomorrow.